Welcome back. Are you excited to get sewing? I am. This time we'll be making this Jester costume. Why? Because I am but a jester to all people in my life. The fabrics we have available to us are still more of this old sheet from my childhood, and all of these colorful silky fabrics that I have from the time I made a stained glass looking dress. We also have this t-shirt I got for free when I was named the button sewing state champion of Illinois in 2016. You might be wondering, why am I filming the introduction to this video in a bathtub? Well, that would be because my sister is doing her homework in our room, and my mother is watching television in the living room, and this is a small condo. Let's get going.
The first thing I did was take a bodice pattern I was familiar with and cut it out of the blue fabric to create a base for my bodice. I extended the center front so it would come down to a point as it did in my rendering. I sewed that all together and did some snipping to make up for the fact that with my adjustments everything didn't line up perfectly.
So, I have tried on the bodice without the sleeves, and it almost fits, but it's a little bit snug. It doesn't really want to close in the front, and when it does, it's not that comfortable. So what I'm going to do is just add a little bit of paneling in one of the bright colors to the center front. Not too much because I still want it to be fitted, but I'm thinking maybe a ½ inch on either side, and that'll make it fitted but wearable. I also have pinned down the neckline more the way I want it to be because I wanted it to have more of this V-neck that led into a high collar. And I initially was not planning on having any lapels, but I really like the way these little folded down pieces look, so I might cover them in something and make them a lapel to the collar. We'll see. I'm going to play that by ear. But for the most part, this is fitting pretty good. And once I make those small adjustments, I'm going to start adding colored fabric to it.
And immediately after filming that, I decided I did not want lapels and chopped them off. I cut some strips out of this off-white fabric and sewed them onto both sides of the center front. Then I ironed down the edge, pinned it in half so that all the raw edges were tucked inside, and top-stitched that in place. This is what it looked like when that step was completed. Then I cut all of the pieces of the bodice out again, this time using the colorful and silky fabrics. The back piece I broke up into 3 separate pieces instead of 2 separate pieces.
So I have had this project going for probably almost a week, and there's almost nothing done because I'm just having a really hard time getting motivated to do it, and I don't feel very inspired about it anymore, and it's just hard with no deadlines to be motivated to do something. But tonight my family is supposed to play Quiplash over Zoom. If you've never played Quiplash, it's a game all about making jokes. And so now I feel some motivation because if I could somehow crank this whole thing out in an afternoon, then I could dance around on Zoom in it every time I went around in Quiplash, and that would be really fun for me. So I'm gonna go into overdrive and really try to get this done today. So I took all the pieces I cut out of the colored fabric and I've pinned it down with the raw edges tucked under to the body of the doublet, and I gotta tell you, I have realized there was no reason to do this instead of just cutting the pieces out of the pattern and sewing them together. This truly has been a waste of many hours, and I thank you for taking that journey with me. The next thing I'm going to do is sew it all down in place, and I'm going to use black thread over all of it as a design choice, not because I'm too lazy to change the thread to match all of the different fabrics.
Then I just top-stitched that all down in place.
So, everything is stitched down. This strategy took longer, was harder, and looks worse than if I had just cut the original pattern pieces out of this and lined it with the blue fabric. But it's done. There's nothing to justify it, and it still doesn't really close in front the way I want it to, so I have decided that instead of adding yet another panel, I'm actually going to add grommets or loops, I haven't really decided yet, and make it a lace-up front. I don't know, maybe a Jester would have that. We can't prove they wouldn't, so that's what's gonna happen.
Next, I had to make a base for the shorts, so I just laid out the shirt, folded in half, and cut around a pair of leggings that I placed on top of it. In the end, I had 2 of these shapes. And I stitched those together the way you do pants. If you don't know how to make pants, look up a video. This isn't going to teach you that.
So in some ways, that was a big success, but in even more ways, it was not. So the pants exist now. Few problems. I accidentally sewed them so that I have this colorful part on the outside, but it's going to be covered, so I'm not that worried about that. they don't really go as high as I want them to, and this fabric doesn't have as much stretch as the leggings, so I can't just hike them up. So I'm thinking I'm just going to add a waistband in the blue fabric to the top and then put some elastic in it to help them cinch. And then I'm going to take this fabric, which I bought initially to make masks, but it is not 100% cotton as it was advertised. It is synthetic, which I learned by burning it, and it melted. There's a tip for you. You can burn fabric if it melts. It's synthetic. If it burns, it's natural. Anyway, but I'm thinking I will use it to be poofs around the pants and then put the colored fabric over that. So we're not going to see much, and we can tuck it into the waistband. So yeah, that's the next thing we're going to try. So I did a bunch more stuff to the pants, and I didn't film it because honestly I did not think any of it was going to work, but it's going pretty good. So now we have a pretty solid base. I made basically just too much pants and then sewed them onto the not enough pants. And now we have Jester pants. I also sewed down a waistband and put a tie through it because I didn't have elastic, so it just ties. And that works pretty good. Next, I'm just going to run colorful strips of fabric down it, and I'm pretty pleased. I feel goofy, I feel jokey, I feel jestery. It's good.
Here I am cutting out all those strips of colorful fabric to go around the pants.
So I've just folded over and stitched down the edges of all of these colorful strips, and my next step is going to be pinning them onto and then stitching them down on the pants. So I have pinned down all the colorful strips around just below the waistband. I just did the placement kind of by eye because I'm really taking some liberties here on the grounds that jesters don't measure things, I guess. That feels fine. So I'm just going to sew all these down, then pin them around the bottoms of the pants, and then sew them down there too. So all of the strips are now sewed down at the waist, but free at the legs, so we gotta take care of that. It is 6:29. Game night is at 7. I have already admitted that I will not be able to have this completely done in time to wear it to Quiplash, but if I can get the pants finished, I have a passable doublet that I can put on, and I will still get my dream of dancing around in my living room and having my family laugh at me. It occurs to me as I say it, I don't know why it's a dream I've chosen to pursue, but it is. So we have 31 minutes, let's do it.
So here you see me pinning the strips of fabric around the leg holes. I actually wound up pleating each strip of fabric because the leg holes are obviously smaller than the waist hole and it made it look nicer. And this is me sewing that all in place.
So I have stitched down all of the colorful fabrics. I pleated them when I pinned them to the pant legs because they're smaller than the waist. But these are officially Jester pants ready to go, and it is 6:43, so I might even have time to put a closure in the middle of the doublet. It's very exciting. Okay, so it is 6:51. I have pinned down all these little pieces of ribbon along the center front, and that is what I'm going to lace another ribbon through to close the front. I also put a piece of boning in this white channel right here so that the sort of point at the bottom of the bodice or doublet stays pointed. Now if I can sew this down, lace it up, and get dressed in the next 9 minutes, I will have succeeded in my goal.
So this is what the costume looked like at this point. I did in fact wear it to Zoom with my family. They were not that impressed. They did not think it was as amusing as I did.
So today is Thursday. Game night was Sunday. I have not touched the Jester costume since then because I have not been, as the kids would say, feeling it. Just kind of lost inspiration to work on this yet again. This one, it's just so different than what I usually do. It's not a big flowy dress, so it's really hard for me to feel excited about it, even though I genuinely want to finish it. But today, I went to Walmart to do some essential shopping, and I found the one thing I felt like this was missing. Some bells to make it jingle and jangle, and now I once again feel motivated to finish it. So I'm going to make just a few small changes to my plan before I continue with this project. First of all, instead of doing the sleeves from the rendering, I'm going to do a more puffed short sleeve that mimics the look of the pants, and then I'm going to add a little bit of a peplum to the bottom of the top just to close the gap between the top and the shorts, and I am potentially going to wear it over some sort of other shirt because it doesn't close all the way in the front, or I might change the closures in the front. We'll see how that goes. Those are our two options. So yeah, I'm just gonna get to work on the sleeves now.
Much like how when making the puffy part of the pants, I simply made too much pants, here I am simply cutting out too much sleeve. I decided that all of the strips of fabric on the sleeves would be blue, so I cut out a bunch of blue strips of fabric. And I did a rolled hem along the edges of all of them. I pinned 4 strips of blue around each arm's eye and sewed them down. Then I did up the seam in both sleeves and gathered them along the top to fit the arm's eye with a long running stitch that I pulled on to gather it. I pinned it in place and sewed it down. Next, I gathered the bottom of the sleeve to fit into some cuffs I had made out of green fabric. I pinned them and the blue strips into place. I sewed that down, then trimmed off all the excess of the blue strips, then folded down the raw edge of the green fabric, folded it in half again, pinned that in place, and hand-stitched it down to be a finished cuff.
So now that the bodice has sleeves, it is really close to being done, but it falls a little too high and it doesn't connect to where the pants hit. So I'm going to have to make a peplum for the bottom. And I have this strip of red fabric that fits pretty well around the waist, but it doesn't have enough to flare out. So I'm going to cut some inserts out of this purple fabric and stick them in so that it flares out.
I cut 4 triangles out of the darker purple and 2 triangles out of the lighter purple. I stitched the red strip along the bottom of the doublet and then sliced open in 3 places on each side to allow for places for the triangles to go. And then I sewed the triangles in. And I was really bad at it and it didn't look that nice, so I'm not going to offer you any instructions, but if you try to do this someday, just know that I also sucked at it. I trimmed off the edges because they weren't aligned perfectly and moved on to making the headdress. So this is where I cut out a bunch of pieces to try and make a hat, and this is where I realized it would be funner to just make 2 scrunchies. I sewed 2 long tubes together around 2 ponytails. I don't know if this is the smartest way to do it, but it's what I did. I then had to turn them inside out while the ponytail was still inside them, which was quite a challenge, but not impossible at the end. And then I hand-stitched the loops closed around the ponytails and stitched on some bells for good measure. And my mom came and hung out with me. That was nice. I don't think she knew she was being filmed. This is footage of me hemming the peplum, which was the very final step. I had actually before this sewn in some bells to be used as buttons down the front, but the footage of that got lost. But this is what it looked like. And this was the final product. I decided to film the grand reveal back in the bathtub where it all started. My favorite thing about this is definitely how it jingles when I walk, especially when I move my head back and forth. And here's some footage of me doing the only jestery skill I have, which would be juggling scarves. Kind of. I learned that in a unit in gym class in the 5th grade. And here's me pretending to tell jokes into the shower head. I wore this over a pair of black tights. I would have preferred color, but as you know, it's hard to get supplies during the pandemic. I was also wearing black suede flats, and I did my makeup, like a fool, I would say.